Today I'm going to review AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. Kai-Fu Lee has an interesting background. He grew up in China until about high school. I think he's 14 or 15. Then he came to the US. He studied here, then he went to college and out in California, I think, and then he worked in Silicon Valley for a few years working on voice recognition, and he worked for a few different companies, Microsoft, I think a couple others. Then he went back to China, and he headed up Google China while that was going on. And then after that, he started a venture capital fund that focuses on AI. So he has a pretty interesting background for covering the business side of AI in China and comparing it to the US. And that's really what this book is. It says AI superpowers, but this is really just an overview of how AI is going to change tech companies in China and the US, and who's going to win out and who's going to do better at implementing AI solutions in business. That's kind of a short book, but it is pretty interesting. I mean, it's interesting if you want to know about AI startups in China and how that's going on. If you're not interested in that, then this book really has nothing to offer. But I thought it was interesting. There's some stuff in here I didn't really know about China. I've read a lot about it, but since Kai-Fu Lee was really like on the ground working with these companies, he has some interesting stories. This book starts off with the world champion at Go being beaten by Google's DeepMind. According to the author, this sparked a huge interest in AI within China. I guess the game's really important there. And that started a lot of investment and government support and a lot of companies all going after implementing AI solutions and really trying to catch up with the US in technology, at least within AI. From there, it just follows a bunch of the startup companies in China and how they've used AI and how they've developed a little bit. The book is really pro-China. I mean, this is probably pretty easy to guess given that the author's Chinese. But it does come across a lot if you're reading it from an American point of view or any kind of Western point of view. The author really thinks that China is going to dominate the world in implementing AI. And he has some good points about why. One of the big reasons the author thinks China is going to do better is that they just have a lot more data. There's so many people and everything's on mobile devices over there. They don't use credit cards or cash. It's all mobile payments. And all the companies are really concentrated. They're all like these WeChat, and there's a few programs that it's like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and then PayPal. They're all combined into one thing. So those large companies have a huge amount of data to work with. But that's really not the interesting part of the book for me. I don't really care about what he thinks is going to happen with AI and startups in the future. The only interesting thing that I really liked in this book are all the little tidbits about China and just having a startup in China. Because from our view, at least from the Western view, China's always copying stuff and they're kind of behind. And we think of it from our perspective as you go over there and you kind of get ripped off. But they do have some good drones, I'll give them that. But in the book, it talks about these startups, and I never really thought about what it would be like as a startup in China. But it is ruthless. Some of the stories in here are just incredible. There's one story about a battle between an antivirus software company called Qiwu, and they have a Qiwu 360 as their product. And Tencent is a giant startup. They have a chat program called QQ, and it's really huge over there, and it does mobile payments. It does a lot of stuff. And Tencent's QQ came out with an antivirus software that was designed to compete against Qiwu's product. And Qiwu responded by putting together a security patch for their antivirus software that would give ridiculous warnings whenever the QQ chat program was opened. It would say that they're invading your privacy and stealing stuff from you. And then on top of that, they implemented a patch that blocked all the ads on the QQ chat program, which is the main source of revenue for the QQ chat app. And then Tencent, because they're so big and they have so much power in China, they got an investigation started on Qiwu, and 30 cops showed up to the headquarters and raided them, and the CEO like took off for Hong Kong to run away from the cops. And then QQ, the Tencent program, came out and said that they wouldn't allow their chat application on any computer that had the Qihoo antivirus software installed. And then Qihoo came out and they had like this giant strike against QQ, and they got all their supporters together. And eventually the government had to get involved and stopped it all. But it was just crazy how just violent and just how ruthless these companies were at competing with each other. It was just really interesting because something like that really probably would never happen in the US. There's some more interesting points in here about how startups are approached in China. In China, all these platforms, they're really like hands-on, and they employ a lot more people than apps in the US. For instance, we have like DoorDash and all these kind of companies that have apps where you can deliver stuff or do transportation. There's something, but they're always outsourcing the labor component, and they don't want to deal with that. But in China, the startups are really hands-on, and they recruit sellers for their marketplace, and it's much more competitive, and they introduce a lot of features designed for specific user groups. And it was interesting reading about the ecosystem in China, because it doesn't get a lot of coverage, or the only portions of the Chinese market that get coverage in the US are the ones that have US business operations. Like everyone knows about Alibaba, because you can use it in the US, and some of these other companies, but like Tencent and some of the ones that are really just in China, there's a lot of interesting stuff about those companies. The book also talks about how there's a lot more support in China from the government, and that their government from like 1990 to 2010, it was almost entirely ran by engineers. And so when the AI got started, there was a lot of support from the government, and they just cut through red tape, and they started a lot of programs that might help in the long run. But that was really the only interesting things I found in the book. It's really short. I mean, there's not much on here. The last section does go into some things about AI and if it's going to increase inequality, or if it's going to be dangerous, things like that. But I felt like that coverage in the book was really poor. There are books out there like Life 3.0 that are a lot better at covering those topics. The only different thing that this book offered were some interesting tidbits about startups in China. And if you're interested in that, then I recommend getting the book. It's really recent. It just came out. The author does have a lot of experience in China and in the US in comparing the two, but it's all business related. It's not that AI related. Honestly, a lot of the interesting parts, at least, the interesting parts were about the startups. It didn't get into all the really detailed stuff about AI or the fun stuff about AI. So it's kind of disappointed in that. But if you do want to know about Chinese tech startups and how they compare to their US counterparts, then get the book and check it out. But otherwise, I wouldn't pick it up. If you're interested in just AI, I wouldn't recommend it. So that's all I have on this book. Like, subscribe. We got some more book reviews coming out. Probably another one in the next couple days, and then I have some more topical stuff on AI coming up. So stick around, and I hope you enjoyed the video.